Hey, sir, I think Ukrainians can tell you a little bit about freedom and liberty, so why don't you settle down?
Then I'm going to have to ask you to leave this room. If we're going to ask the police to remove you. Yes, we're asking the police to remove you both.
These visuals that you just saw are nowhere close to the freedom of speech, with Canadian PM Justin Trudeau asked India to practice during the Punjabi farmers' protest in India. You see, Trudeau got the so-called hecklers removed from the room because they were asking questions. Apparently, asking questions that do not align with your political ideology is called heckling in first world countries. Hello and welcome, I am Shreya and you're watching The Pamphlet. Canadian PM Justin Trudeau, who has kicked up a diplomatic row with India over the killing of Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Canada, has now said that he does not want to escalate the situation with India. Trudeau found himself diplomatically isolated after making wild allegations against India. However, that also brought forward the glaring hypocrisy of the Canadian government. Just a few days back on September 29th, Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission announced that all its online streaming services that offer podcast must now have to formally register with the government to permit regulatory controls. These services also have to provide the information related to their content and subscribership. Also, just a few days after, the Instagram accounts of news portals like CNN and Bloomberg were restricted for the Canadian nationals, owing to the government's legislation. Another example of Canada's hypocrisy is their ban on speech against Islamist ISIS. But on the other hand, they, on their soil, allowed over 65,000 Canadian Sikhs to vote in the Khalistan referendum. So a terror organization is not a terror organization if it threatens the sovereignty of brown Indians from the third world. The international media has also tried to give context to suggest that US killing Osama Bin Laden on Pakistani soil is not the same as allegations of India killing Khalistani terrorists on Canadian soil. Here it is important to reiterate that there is no evidence of Indian agents involved in the killing of Nijjar. The Canadian PM only made these wild allegations without any evidence. On the other hand, Osama's killing on Pakistani soil was live telecast in the White House with Barack Obama seeing it live. Well, all are aware about the anti-India and extremist activities that pro-Khalistan supporters have been indulging in across the world. Hindu temples are vandalized with anti-Indian slogans. Indian consulates are attacked and Indian tricolor is beaten with shoes. These assailants roam freely in Canada and in fact they are being supported by the Canadian authorities, who in the case of Khalistan terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar had already given him a warning of a possible attack against him. And not just this, since decades Canada has provided safe space for those who have wanted to carry out terror activities on Indian soil, whether it was providing shelter to those who escaped after assassinating Indian politicians, to the terrorists who were responsible for the Air India bombing in 1985. Back in 2018, Trudeau was on a visit to India and a dinner invite was issued to convicted Khalistani terrorist Jaspal Atwal. The invite was extended by the Canadian High Commissioner to India. Atwal was convicted of trying to kill Punjab Minister Malkaid Singh Sidhu in Vancouver in 1986. However, after the widespread reportage and concerns raised over Atwal's entry on Indian soil, the invite was withdrawn. Former Punjab Chief Minister Captain Amrinder Singh, who met Trudeau on his visit, had also raised concerns of Canada's handling of Khalistan terrorism. Except displaying his utter lack of freedom of speech, Outlook, the Indian magazine which reported on Atwal's invite, was barred from the state dinner. The magazine had also written critical pieces about Khalistani terrorists being nurtured on Canadian soil, which likely upset Trudeau and hence barred them instead. Another hypocritical stance of Canada was exposed when farmers, mostly from the Indian state of Punjab, were protesting against the progressive amendments to farm laws that was to provide better options to farmers in India. At that time, the Canadian politicians interfered and tried to insinuate that the Indian government was clamping down on the rights of citizens to protest. Just a year later, when protests erupted in Canada over COVID-19 restrictions, the Trudeau government clamped down on the protesters. He was taken away to a high security place and police used force to quell the protesters. This duality of the Canadian government on protests reeks of nothing but high-handed racism and ingrained white supremacist attitude. And how can we forget the recent instance where Justin Trudeau made baseless allegations against the Indian government's involvement in the killing of pro-Khalistan extremist Hardeep Singh Nijjar. And just a few days after, they felicitated a Nazi who was responsible for the death of Polish Jews during World War II. This is the extent of how low the Trudeau-led government can go down in the name of vote bank politics. His hypocrisy stands well exposed now. Thank you for watching. If you like the content, do like, share and subscribe to our channel, The Pamphlet.